Good to see you again. Today we will discuss about part 2 of descriptive research. In this session, we will talk about two methods, observation and measurement. Observation is a technique which is not very new to all of us. We are Vaidyas and we are used to observe the patient. Darshana sparshana prashnaihi pariksheta cha roginam is our everyday experience. But when we use this for research as a technique, we have to understand and learn many things to make our research meaningful and fruitful. So in observation as a technique, anyone can gather as much data as possible. The objective is to get information which is intended, but sometimes even unintended. The methodology used here is participant observation and non-participant observation. In a group, the researcher can be a participant, one member of the group. He is performing that task and also observing his fellow participants. In non-participant type, the researcher is not the participant, but he is only observer. Similarly, the observational research method can be structured and non-structured. You may like to have a structure in the mind to get relevant information. Otherwise, sometimes it may happen that a lot of information will come in which can divert the researcher from his objective or focus. The data collection method for observation is like field notes, which needs to be immediately recorded, because we can trust our memory, but there are many studies which talk about memory lapses. You feel that you will remember later, but later on you tend to forget it. And that's why recording, need documentation is very important, not to miss out on certain important aspect of a research problem. The method of analysis for observational research is similar to interview, that is descriptive or inferential, depending upon the type of question. Let me share with you an interesting example for participant observation. There are two researchers, Miss S and Miss B. They wanted to analyze the sense of pleasure in older women who were going for exercise with music and yoga. They were not doing it together. A group was going for exercise to music and the other group was going for yoga. So this paper examined the lived experience of older women participants in low impact exercise to music class and yoga class. Both these researchers were part of the different groups. They had decided how they will list or enlist the reactions of the participants, and then they analyzed it using phenomenological interpretative approach. To learn more about these approaches, you will have to refer books. Even in my book on research methodology, I have described these things in detail. And the focus of analysis was on relationship between pleasure, well-being, senses, physical activity, and aging. After this research, it was possible for both of them to come to the conclusions whereby they could identify, they could label the types of pleasure the older women prefer. So this type of study is participant observation. The next example I am giving you is another interesting example. The study was performed on a group of nurses. The objective was nurses' health promoting activity. It is like we say that there are Chatushpada of Chikitsa, and in that Paricharaka is one important pillar. In modern medicine as well, the role of nurse in health promotion is has a great value. It is respected role. But a study was conducted to find out how well nurses carry out this activity of health promotion. They are in contact with the inpatients for more time than the doctor. They become well acquainted with the patients who are staying for maybe 2 days, 3 days, 5 days. And therefore, this type of research, which was non-participant observation, is very interesting. So here the sample was purposive sample of 8 nurses working in ward. As I told you, the method was non-participant and interview of all the nurses and some patients. Outcome measures were health promoting strategies employed by nurses, and in that patients' participation. The results were such that nurses practiced traditional health education, that means to tend and care for the patient, and the patient's participation was limited to personal experience and personal requirement of care. The nurses were focused on giving routine care. So the conclusion was their health promoting activity was not up to the expected mark. And the relevance of this research in clinical practice was nursing program should be designed in such a way that it must highlight health promotion as an integral part to practice of nursing. So we have seen both the examples, participant observation and non-participant observation. Of course, in both the examples, the technique was not only limited to observation, it was supplemented by interviews also. So I'll come to that at a later point. Let us just see the advantages and disadvantages of the technique of observation. We being doctors, we feel that observation is the best method. Let's see, and it is best because it is direct. We are dealing with the real-time situation. We are in the natural environment. There is no artificial sense of, you are doing something more or you are doing something special or specific. But there are many disadvantages. There are many disadvantages to this technique. There is the first disadvantage, which is known, is observer effect. This is also famous as Hawthorne effect. Whenever you know that you are being observed, you put your best foot forward. It's like, I'm giving a lecture, I'm being interviewed, or I'm appearing for an exam and I have prepared well, so I'll put my best foot forward. And this is called Hawthorne effect, which may overpower the real things a little bit to a certain extent. The second disadvantage is observer drift. After a period of substantial period of observation, maybe participant or non-participant, you acquire the skill, and then unknowingly some subtle changes in the observation method happen. We always know that after seeing nadi of 100 patients, our fingers and our mind is ready to check the person in less time, and maybe we might unnotice certain thing. This type of drift is called observer drift. The third type of disadvantage happens, that is observer inconsistency. Dissimilar results at two different occasions for similar behavior. So the observer is observing a similar behavior, same person, but there is a gap of time. You observe one thing today and you are observing the same thing after 3 days, and your observations come different. So that is same behavior, two different occasions, and the observation is not consistent. And the fourth thing is observer bias. Because observational research is qualitative, it is about perception, it is about characteristics. Observer tends to make purposeful change in observation to achieve best result. The observer may tend to change certain observations to achieve best results. So this is called bias. And because of these 4 disadvantages, which are more than the single most advantage, for this particular research, careful planning is necessary to overcome the disadvantages and increase the reliability of this technique. Let's go to the next technique. It's measurement. Measurement is the most important tool for descriptive research. We are dealing with qualitative aspects. We are dealing with varna, we are dealing with dhvani, we are dealing with sparsha, we are dealing with the akriti, and here we need to have certain measurement methods. These are the means of comparison. The comparison can be of three types: between participants, across participants, and we might compare the same person before the intervention and after the intervention. Various types of instruments are used to measure any characteristic. There is biometry, there are various types of scales, and there are tests. In biometrics, there are two types: physical and behavioral. We all are aware about our fingerprints. Nowadays, this has become a very routine measure. Even if you want to enter a building in a metropolitan city, you have to use this fingerprint. On all the airports, facial recognition, iris scan, hand geometry, all these are done. The DNA mapping also comes in the category of biometrics. There are certain instruments which measure vocal pattern. Your signature and handwriting can be traced. All these techniques are available in the forensic laboratories of different cities, and you can make use of these techniques for your research. A very interesting research I am going to share with you, where they have used this mapping technique for correlation of Prakriti type with the metabolites. This research was conducted by Shirolkar and his group. This group wanted to see whether there are specific dominant marker metabolites exist according to Prakriti. Metabolites have known metabolic pathways. So once you know that a particular Prakriti type carries a particular set of metabolites, we can assume that those metabolic pathways are predominant in those Prakritis. So for this, the group studied on 38 healthy male individuals. They were assessed for their dominant Prakriti type using specific format. Their fasting blood samples were collected. The processed plasma samples were subjected to rapid resolution liquid chromatography, electrospray ionization, quadrupole time of flight, mass spectrometry. It's a huge, long test. Mass profiles were aligned and subjected to multivariate analysis. After this analysis, they identified that the neurotransmission and oxidative stress can be correlated with Vata. BCAA catabolic, androgen, xenobiotics metabolic processes can be correlated with Pitta, and aromatic amino acids, sphingolipid and pyrimidine metabolic processes were correlated with Kapha Prakriti. And these were the dominant marker pathways for the three respective Prakritis. So in this study, the tool used is that the pathway is the metabolites isolated from plasma. In another study of Swara, an Ayurvedic tablet used for hyperfunctional voice disorders, here the instruments here the methods used were acoustic and perceptual voice analysis, which was done by CSL 4500 multidimensional voice program, GRBAS rating scale, and stroboscopic evaluation. So various types of measurement methods and instruments can be used. Let me take you to another type of instruments. These are known as scales. You all are aware about it. But basically, there are three different scales. The first known scale is Likert scale. This scale is very similar to ranking questions. It uses 4 or 5 words, which are adjectives, describing function. This is called 5-point Likert. There are anything is measured between two extremes: cold, freezing cold, to extremely hot. So freezing cold is extreme here on the left hand side, and extremely hot is the extreme on the right hand side. And then freezing cold, cold, warm, hot, and extremely hot. These 5 terms describe the scale to measure temperature of any substance. So both extremes are put at both the ends and the scale is employed. The second type of scale, which is famously known as VAS pain scale, because this was initiated for measurement of pain. 𝘚𝑗𝑥 𝐷𝑉𝐻𝑢𝑐𝐻𝑚 But how to measure the pain? And a scientist found out this scale. It is called the pain scale. It is an individual scale. It measures change for one person at different time points. Today, tomorrow, day after tomorrow, after 7 days, after 1 month. Here, a 10 centimeter scale on horizontal line, which uses 2 descriptive terms. Left end is generally the worst, and right end non-existing. So pain is worst is left end, and non-existing pain is right end. This scale is applicable to groups as well. So a group consisting of 10 people, 10 patients can be put together, and the mean can be used as individual scale in comparative model. The third type of scale is numeric rating scale, which consists of series of numbers from 0 to 10. Let us see how these scales are, how people are using these scales. A very interesting study I found out when I was looking for the studies made using this VAS and NRS and others. This study uses grazing sheep as a model, and they are comparing actually which scale is better. They want to know which scale is better and how whether they correlate with each other or whether they are very much different. The results they give out, can they match, or the difference is so significant that the interpretations will be completely changed, or what. So in this study, the use of numerical rating scale and visual analog scale for subjective assessment of lameness using sheep as a model was studied. The numeric rating scale consisted of 5 divisions: 0, 1, 2, 3 and 4. 4 of these divisions, 1 to 4, described lameness, and 0 means no lameness. The VAS used a 100 mm horizontal line with vertical bars at each end. One end was labeled sound and the other end was labeled could not be lamer, could not be more lamer. 2 independent observers graded lameness in 62 sheep. Between and within observer differences were assessed for each scoring system to compare both the scales. The results indicated no significant differences between 2 observers scoring lameness using either the VAS or NRS. The scores obtained using VAS were not normally distributed, although differences between scores for 2 observers were there and correlation was good, but there was no perfect agreement. So see how interesting research can be when you are talking about just development and reliability of the tools and using the tools for your research. Another example, the study was published in Indian Journal of Basic and Applied Medical Research. They use this pain management, and they have compared all the three scales: VAS scale, numeric rating scale, and Likert scale. And the conclusion here was the numeric rating scale is more preferred option by patients. The objective was which scale gives accurate results and which is easier to work with. You can read these original papers which I am quoting here by clicking on the references or copy pasting them and putting in your web browser. You must, I am sure all the students who are working in MD and PhD, not the undergrad, but those who are working on in MD and PhD, they are aware about different scales. Like here, the WOMAC scale. This is the advanced scale. It has 24 items, condition-specific questionnaire available in 5-point Likert, 100 mm VAS, and 11-box numerical rating scale format. So all these, so this WOMAC scale has 3 subscales. There are 5 questions for pain, 2 questions for stiffness, and 17 questions for physical functioning. Acceptable psychometric properties for variety of knee injuries and disorders is the key point for this WOMAC scale. Nowadays, almost 25-30 scales available for measurement of organ specific or disease specific characteristic, which is generally a qualitative characteristic. And that's why this implementation of these scales make our research more meaningful and valuable. After the scales, we will discuss a little about tests. Tests are standardized protocols to measure individuals' response to a disease condition. They talk about functional ability, they measure mental ability, they measure quality of life, and disease-specific protocol. The tests are standardized and validated because they are the responses with fixed method of statistical analysis is at their core. And that's why they're different than questionnaire. In a questionnaire, the responses are not that fixed. There are open-ended questions we have seen in the last presentation, and the statistical analytical method also depends. But in case of tests, everything is set and fixed. In this study conducted in Brazil, the researchers wanted to check the effects of yoga practice in school physical education on children's motor abilities and social behavior. So yoga has reached at this level in the schools for very young children of first grade in the public school. After 2 weeks of yoga intervention, they wanted to test the social behavior and motor abilities. There were 3 tests which they used. Brunin's 𝘊𝘶𝑗 test of motor proficiency, 2nd edition they used. Then flexibility test and pictorial scale of perceived competence and social acceptance for younger children. And the results were very encouraging. You also can check this paper on PubMed. See, to assess the effect of counseling sessions, HAM-D scales are used in psychology and psychiatry both. So, all these scales, interview, questionnaire, observation, and measurement, they all need to be reliable. What is reliability? Reliability is stability and consistency of information. Reliability of tools is very important to get consistent information. It is the extent to which you can rely on the results obtained from the tool. So you have set up a questionnaire to analyze Prakriti. That questionnaire used in Indian population, used in African population, used in European population should give reliable results is the minimum expectation from that questionnaire, and therefore it has to be tested. So consistent results from the same tool on different occasions in different groups should be there. Reliability can be calculated statistically. The next very important point about all these tools is validity. Validity is checking for evidence of the thing under measurement. So we want to measure the lameness of the sheep, and after employing that scale, we should be able to come to a certain conclusion that yes, this measures the lameness and nothing else. And the next step is to what extent that test measures what it is designed to measure. This is called validity. It's a detailed subject. We will talk about it sometime in later lectures. But the aspects of validity are face validity, content validity, construct validity, and criterion validity. So each aspect is important from a research perspective, and there are many good books, presentations are also available to check all of these. Validity is tested to ascertain the appropriateness, truthfulness, and authenticity of the tool, not of the data, but of the tool. Because of the tool, whatever data you are going to generate will be authentic, appropriate, true, and therefore it will be reliable. So there are certain methods to test reliability. These are statistical tests and calculations. Observed score is equal to true score plus error. Reliability equals to variation around a true score divided by variation around an observed score. The reliability coefficient ranges from 0 to 1, and the higher the coefficient, the more reliable is the measurement. The reliability is also known as inter-rater. Two different raters obtain same result from the same test. Identical results indicate high reliability. Parallel or alternate is another way of testing reliability. To measure one attribute, two different tests are developed in parallel, or there are two arms of the same test. If you get similar results, that means your instrument and tool is correct, more appropriate. The third way of testing reliability is internal consistency. This is called test for homogeneity. And coherence power of coefficient is used to calculate inter-rater and intra-rater reliability. Why I am talking this to you is you should at least know these basics, so that when you talk to the statistician, when he tells you about these things and he wants to show you calculations, you would be able to understand why these are necessary and why these are important for your tool. There are certain threats to validity. You keep on learning new techniques, new skills, and learning changes your perception. There is another thing called, this is called learning effect. There is another thing called developmental maturation. And also sometimes failure to take appropriate factors such as characteristics of sample population into account while doing the research. So these bring threats to validity. And to avoid this, you have to discuss with experts to check validity studies from literature to ensure that your study is valid. A reliable scale is not always a valid scale, and a valid scale is not automatically reliable. Don't you feel this is like the difficult Padartha Vidyan, which talks about Vyapti, Avyapti, Ativyapti? So it's very similar. These concepts are very similar. In all the examples, 7-8 examples I gave you in both these presentations, and I couldn't provide you with one example for that one technique, because researchers tend to use 2 or 3 techniques together. And this is known as triangulation or mixed methods to get better results. to get better outcome and true picture. So, for example, if we want to test dietary habits of students staying in hostels, we will use two tools, questionnaire and interview. If I want to check impact of yoga or physiotherapy in a specific condition, I'll use questionnaire and measurement with some instrument, some non-pharmacological technique, and then I will get better results. I mean, I'll be able to reach to the true conclusion. I want to highlight one particular type of research here, quasi-experimental design. In this design, the study is not planned by the researcher. He is not party to planning the research to see for the outcomes. And therefore, it falls on the verge or borderline of observational and experimental. Because it's not fully observational research and it is not completely experimental. For example, in present situation of COVID-19, we are seeing that there are many elderly people are suffering from depression. Now, impact of COVID-19 pandemic on mental health of elderly population in metro cities becomes a quasi-experimental study. Because nobody has planned this, but this has happened. And now the thing is happening and we are gathering data to understand one particular aspect of mental health during this pandemic. So there are various types of studies and methods which are available, and we can make good use of them to understand and analyze Ayurvedic concepts and Ayurvedic principles. See here, I have given some more examples of application of descriptive or inferential methods for Ayurvedic research. Suppose you take food and nutrition as your broad topic. So dining habit guidelines, ahara vidhi, if we want to understand and study the principles, you can use these techniques which I have just now tried to explain to you. Food processing guidelines are there. Ashvasan Chikitsa using Ayurvedic techniques. One of my students has started a Pradnyaparad OPD, and they are analyzing Pradnyaparad hetus as cause of psychological as well as physical illnesses. So you can also use certain Ayurvedic principles of Dinacharya, then Panchakarma procedures for health maintenance. And while doing this, we have to use descriptive and inferential methodologies where the tools are questionnaire, interview, measurements using different scales, tests and instruments. Coming to the last part, we have seen that after you find a question or a research problem, you are offered with mainly 4 different ways to approach the question. It can be a literary way, observational way, experimental way or clinical way. In the observational methods, that is descriptive, inferential and epidemiological methods, the main tools are interview, questionnaire, observation and measurement. We have also seen how to select and develop the tools and apply them. Why reliability and validity of each tool is important and it should be calculated statistically. We have also seen that most of the researchers prefer mixed methodologies to get yathartha jnana, and the statistical methods used for observational studies are generally descriptive or inferential. With this, I would like to say thank you. And let's keep talking on some different aspects, maybe literary research or epidemiological methods as it comes. Let me tell you one thing for sure. Ayurveda is a huge knowledge base. We have lots of leads to do meaningful research. We have seeds of these concepts of pratyaksha praman, anuman praman, shabda praman. and Yukti Praman. So based on or taking the essence of all these pramanas and support of newer methodologies and techniques available to us, we can definitely do wonderful research and generate evidence for Ayurvedic concepts. It is known as proof of concept, and we are rich in knowledge. So let's do meaningful research and enrich our science. Thank you very much.